If somebody is starting from scratch, what are the traits, skill sets that they should be cultivating in order to up the odds of their success?
They should focus on one thing in general rather than lots of different things that you're not sure about. Because if you're starting out, everything looks like an opportunity. So the correct answer is all of them are opportunities, but all of them won't work unless you pick one, right? So you have to say no to all the other mistresses. So boom, you pick one. You have to learn how to advertise, which I define as the process of making known. So how do you let other people know about the stuff you sell? So you have to advertise. There's 6 ways to do it. I covered 5 just now. Cold outbound, whether that's content, whether it's running paid ads, whether it's affiliates, word of mouth. There's 6 ways you can do it. And then once people engage with whatever advertisement you have to sell them. So advertising is the first skill, selling them is the second skill. And
Makes
then
sense.
product would be the third skill, which is the thing that you're ultimately advertising and selling.
Okay, so that gets us 6 figures. What gets us 7?
Doing the same thing consistently. So usually once people do it in the beginning, they're sporadic, they're not consistent with it. Just the act of doing the same thing every day usually gets people to 100,000 a month, which sounds crazy to probably people listening, but most people who think that's crazy also haven't done it consistently for an extended period of time. And so I use something that I call the rule of 100, which is 100 primary actions, whether that's 100 minutes of content creation per day, 100 reach outs per day, $100 of ad spend per day. Just like you have to pick one of them, but 100 per day, and you do that for 100 days, and I promise you'll be making 6 figures if you do that. There's 3 traits that people then they looked at because they were trying to find habits of highly successful people, and when they actually pulled apart, it's not, and I hope I'm not contradicting anything, but there's people who are really rich who wake up really late and work really late, and there's people really rich who wake up really, really early, and there's people who are really rich who eat really healthy, and there's people really rich who drink Coca-Cola and eat French fries every day. And so there's all these things that we want to make as truths, but there's easy examples that counter those things. So it's like, what are the few things that are true, or at least that seem to be present in all of the situations? And it seems as though there were surprisingly few. And so the 3 common traits that they had found were, 1, that people have a superiority complex. They believe they're better than others, and they believe that they deserve more than everyone else does, and that they can accomplish big goals, right? So they have a bigger vision because they believe they deserve it, or whatever it is, that they were able to identify that. The second thing that they were able to identify is that they had crippling insecurity, and which is a paradox of paradoxes. They feel they'll never be enough, and they'll always be measured against the things that they've achieved. And so you've got this crazy dynamic between they think they're better than everyone, they think they deserve more, they want to go after this big hill, and at the same time, they fear they'll never be good enough, and they'll never actually achieve it, and they actually suck. And then the third piece, which kind of adds the beautiful mix of this, is impulse control.
Yeah.
And so they're able to control their actions and focus on a single thing for an extended period of time. And so if you put those 3 things together, it's like you've got a big goal that's pulling you this way. You've got this big fear that you are running away from, and then you've got impulse control to keep you focused on the one thing that matters.
Yes.
And if you do that, if you are the type of person who has those traits, then you are very likely to be successful. So to the marshmallow point, because I think this is really interesting and I don't think it's talked about enough, which is they like to separate the kids into the 2 buckets, right? Like the kid who waits for 2 marshmallows and the kid who just says, I want the marshmallow now. But I feel like they should have a third bucket, which says, how long do they ask the kid to wait for the marshmallow, right? Because it's not, do you have, because I like to think of things in a lot of times we have false dichotomies or we have binaries where we're good or bad, disciplined or undisciplined, I'm honest or dishonest, right? When I think more reality is, to what degree am I honest? To what extent am I disciplined? To what degree am I, loyal, right?
Oh God, there's a whole conversation.
Yeah. And so I think that each of those 3 traits that we just went over, it's not do I have them or not for the people who are listening, because people like to think, yes, I have it, or oh, well, I have all 3 of those. It's not having them. And I'm sure you've interviewed some of the most successful people on the planet. It's how much do you have, right? And so I think that your ability to delay gratification, it's not just oh, I can wait a week or I can wait a month. But I made this tweet that went pretty viral. And it was if you can wait a year, you can make a ton of money. If you can do something for 12 months, you can not need for financial goodness pretty much for the rest of your life. I'm not saying you're going to be hella rich.
Right.
But you're not going to need for anything if you can wait 12 months. If you can wait a decade, you're going to be above the 1%. If you can wait 10 years for an outcome, be able to do the doing without seeing the result for 10 years, you will be able to be above most achievement of most people. And if you can wait a lifetime and you don't even need to see the result of your doing this, even while you are alive, but know that it may get done after you pass, then I believe that you can change the world. And I mean that. And so I think that if people can just extend the time horizon that they're measuring themselves on, they can just do so much more. I mean, you've probably heard the Bill Gates quote where he says, people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in a decade. I think it's the same thing, just continue to draw it out. And I think as we've been able to, achieve more leverage and make more money, et cetera, my horizon has extended. And when I listen to the people who I want to emulate, I can almost tell by the measurement of money that they talk about and the measurement of time that they discuss how successful they are or how successful I think they're going to be. Like if I talk to a 25-year-old and he's talking about what he wants to do in 2 decades and his whole plan of what he's going to do, as long as he's not just blowing smoke because he's heard an interview from me, then I'm like, this kid's got it. He gets it. He gets it. And most people just don't think they can't wait 90 days. Most people can't even wait a month, right? They start a diet and 14 days later they don't have a six-pack and they can't wait. But like if you do a year, you can look whatever way you want for the most part, by and large. And if you wait a year for the ability to learn how to sell, you wait a year for the ability to learn how to market, wait a year just providing value to a group of people for free and then delaying your ask, you can do whatever you want.
I have a method that I can teach people how to do it, but most people still won't do it, which is to build the desire, to create an association between the doing that thing and the meaning and purpose that you want to have for your own life, and that it's not going to seem self-evident. You have to bolt it on. It feels kind of fake in the beginning, but if you really invest, and it really is something that you care about, it can't be fake. But if it really is something that you care about and you build that intense association, then you can fight through that. But boredom kills more entrepreneurs than fear or failure ever will.
When you say boredom, do you mean that they're starting something, it's starting to work, and then they just switch because they're ADD, or?
No, I mean that doing something where you don't get the result that you want and it's 10 years out and you're going to have to do what Jeff Bezos calls overhead, right? No matter how much you love your job, there's always overhead. There's boring shit. And what I find is people, they can't stay on task. I find in myself a strong desire not to stay on task because it is boring. It's just boring. Or even worse, if it feels bad and you have to keep doing it and you have to wake up every day and face that like this is really going to be tough, and it's going to be tough for an undetermined amount of time. So it's not even like I know it's going to be a year. There's an unknown amount of suffering before me and I have to somehow continue to muster the enthusiasm.
And have faith that this theory that I have is actually going to work out.
Or that I'll get better. Right? That maybe this theory isn't the right theory, but I'll be able to figure it out.
It's interesting you say that because we talk about need to believes when we're thinking about a company that we want to invest in. And so it's like, what are the, we try to have as few need to believes as possible for, a growth thesis to happen. And then not only do we want to have as few as possible.
Really interesting. Need to believe, I need to believe that this is true for this outcome to be possible.
Really so
smart. How
do we have as few of those as possible? And how do we have that those need to believe statements are as high likelihood as humanly possible, right? So it's like, if we had a business that was reliant on an inflationary period or something, I'd say like, okay, well, I believe that that's, it's high likelihood that it's going to occur. Okay, so I feel okay about that one. And if that was the only thing I need to believe for this whole business to be successful, I'd be like, where do I write a check? This is the only thing I need. So it's how many of these are there, right? And if there's a lot of them, then with each additional line, our likelihood of getting the outcome we want goes down. And so I think that if reversing that for success for somebody who's coming along is like, what amount of action would it be unreasonable for me not to be successful? And so for me, it's like, I believe that if you do 10,000 cold calls, you'll get better. Like it would be unreasonable for you not to be good. Like after that level of effort, if you run, if you take half your paycheck every month or a third of your paycheck every month and you say, I'm going to advertising university, which is I'm going to spend money actually advertising, trying to get people to click on this thing and give me their name and phone number. If you go and you spend that amount of money on actually advertising, after a year, after 2 years, you'll probably be pretty good. Especially if you join a community of other people who are doing the same thing, right? You got mentors who have done and give you frameworks that you can just work off so you can shortcut your path to success. It becomes unreasonable that you wouldn't be more successful in the future than you are today. And so I like thinking about things in terms of directionally correct rather than will I hit it or not, right? I think there's so many binaries because it's easy psychologically for us to say yes, no, honest, dishonest, et cetera, successful, not successful. But it makes making decisions really hard because you're like, is this the path for me? Is this the product the business I'm going to start? Whereas like, well, if I started something, I would be more likely to be successful than if I did not start anything. And from there, I will gain experience and perspective to then make the next iteration on the main thing. And Was Quest your first thing ever?
First successful thing.
But you'd done other stuff before that and failed. And I was like, I hope Quest wasn't his first thing. Most people had.
Thank God it wasn't.
Right.
To be honest.
Most people had a graveyard of failures before they had their actual first success. And so most people spend all this time, a different tweet that went viral, it said like, with 20 hours of focused effort, most people can be pretty decent at something, whether it's guitar, it's singing, even cold calling. If you actually cold called for 20 hours, focused effort, you'd be decent. But most people spend years waiting to do the first hour.